We have a whole society, a whole cultural that's against this for men. And one of the things that we're not supposed to do is we're not supposed to show weakness. We're not supposed to show failure. You can get angry. That's an acceptable man emotion, right? But not something like grief or tears or fear or anything else. You can't do that. You're a man. Be a man.
Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. For the disparaged, depleted, and delinquent souls trying to find our way, we're talking about the scary part of the journey, where we don't know how it'll end. Let's be free to face our fucking failures in real time as the most unadulterated, truest version of who we are. No sugarcoating. Welcome to the shit show, you derelict.
Hey there, derelicts. It's Josh Abandonado with another episode of the Derelict Podcast. And another special guest, Jason Lang, is here with us today. Jason, what's up, man? How are you?
I'm so stoked to be here, Josh. Thanks for having me, man.
That's awesome. I love that you're stoked to be here. I'm stoked that you're here. It makes two of us.
Yeah.
So, Jason, you know, he is... Maybe he's who I want to be. I don't know. We'll see after the end of this episode. But he's so one of the things that you told me, Jason, when we got to know each other, is that you're a man's embodiment coach, which I'm not going to have you answer right now what that even means because I have no idea what that means. But I'm sure that our audience is going to be thinking about that until we get back to it. So stay tuned. A little preface for what's to come later. Embodiment. Think about embodiment. Am I in my body? Okay, got it. And you lead men's group, and you're really passionate about men's groups, right? You
absolutely
think that maybe every man should be in a men's group?
That's my mission. Get every man into a men's group. I think the world would be a much better place.
Awesome. So we're going to define that later on. We're going to try to figure out what a man's group is. Is that just a couple guys, you know, sitting around watching a football game, or is it people actually having a conversation and being deep and meaningful? We'll see. And you also do individual coaching. And, you know, you obviously have a passion for men. I do too. I think that's why we connected here, right? Yeah. This whole podcast is about vulnerability. It's about dealing with failures. It's about getting into the muck of the stuff that we often don't want to get into, and especially we as men do not want to get into because we have a whole society, a whole cultural that's against this for men, right? Our man box, so to speak, is like this, and we're never supposed to leave it. And one of the things that we're not supposed to do is we're not supposed to show weakness. We're not supposed to show failure. We're not supposed to deal with tough stuff. We're just supposed to grin and bear it. Or as my grandpa used to say, you know, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, start again, right? That old kind of Western theme of you fall off the horse, you get back on. You don't cry about it. You don't grieve it. You don't think about, like, why did I fall off the horse? And emotions are not acceptable, at least those emotions. You can get angry. That's an acceptable man emotion, right? But not something like grief or tears or fear or anything else. You can't do that. You're a man. Be a man.
Yep, that's right.
Well, this whole episode's not going to be about that. We are going to be talking about masculinity. We're going to talk about what it actually means to be a man, especially in this weird world we live in where man isn't even a thing anymore, apparently. So I'm really stoked that you're here, Jason. I'm really excited to get into these conversations. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm in. Let's do it.
So maybe let's just start with this. I'd love to know just a little bit about your story. You know, we don't need to spend an hour on this, but I want to know a little bit about your story, specifically in relation to where did this come from? Where did you start getting this, you know, man passion, for lack of a better way of saying it? You know, who are you? Why should we listen to you? Like, what brought you to this point?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, my journey to becoming a guide for men and facilitator of men really springs out of my own journey of what I needed as I grew up as a man and discovered, you know, where my strengths and where my many weaknesses and challenges were. And for me, you know, like a lot of men, it goes all the way back. So it starts with my family of origin and when I was growing up in that, you know, I'm a white guy raised in the Midwest, lower middle class. So my basic security needs were met. I wasn't raised in like a volatile or abusive household or anything like that. But what I did uncover as I got a little older was there was a lot of neglect, particularly emotional neglect. So there was just not a sense of interiority in my family. Like we all kind of just lived under the same roof. You know, Dad did some activities with us when he could, but he was mostly at work 7 days a week. And I was kind of just left on my own. to my own devices to a large extent. And, like a lot of kids grow up and it's kind of normal. So you just think it's normal. And then for me, it all really I started to notice things when puberty hit and I got into my teenage years. And suddenly there's these extreme drives inside of me and a desire and longing to connect with women in my case. And what I discovered was I had no idea how to do it. Like I was deeply uncomfortable. My body would get tight, clam up. I would get sweaty. I'd get very anxious. I literally had no idea how to talk or relate to women. And around the same time, I started to discover I got pretty lucky in a sense of, I was always more of an introverted kid, but I discovered some kind of fellow nerds, so to speak, in my high school years, which I'm so grateful for. But I noticed they had a way of connecting with each other that just my nervous system did not move towards, which was like horseplay, just touch, just kind of, wrestling, being connected physically. And those two things started to kind of spring into my awareness. And as I got older, I just, I was perpetually single. I was a virgin till my mid-20s. There was so much pain and loneliness for me. And it all kind of came together I got lucky at one point and, knew I needed to change and got exposed to some philosophers and stuff. But long and short of it, I was like 26 when I got exposed to men's groups and somatic therapy simultaneously. And I got into my first rooms with other men, many of whom were deeper than me, more embodied than me. And I viscerally remember sitting in a circle with one of my later mentors, who was, in his probably early 60s at the time. And, I wasn't a kid anymore. I was in my 20s. Mm-hmm. And I remember having the felt body experience sitting across from him of, oh my God, that's what I want to be when I grow up.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't I want to have his job. It's his presence is something I long to be able to embody. The way he sat, spoke, led, dealt with conflict, the way I saw him engage with his wife, I was like, whatever that is, that's what I want more of. And that really kind of just accelerated my journey and is one of the big reasons I'm such a proponent of groups in particular, because we get to get this transmission from other men that so many of us were lacking as kids, right? Like you said it, as I joke, we're kind of given three options as kids: macho jerk, just sheer bravado, go for what I want, kind of my way or the highway energy, often a lot of volatility in that. And those men tend to, if they're not careful, cause a lot of damage in their relationships and the environment, to people around them, sometimes even to themselves. Then there's kind of the reaction to that of the nice guy, I don't want to ever make anyone uncomfortable. I'm going to disconnect from my sexuality, from my voice, from my authority, because I just want to play it safe. Or, sounds like you literally had this in your life, what I kind of call the stoic grandfather. I just show up, I do my job. You show up with your family and you just do not share what's going on inside. You just batten the hatches down. And the truth is, all three of those are failing men pretty miserably in different ways. And it catches up to us. And so when I got exposed to men that had something else, that were showing me a different way, I was all in. I was just all in, and I kept going and going and going, and needed the men's work in particular, along with certain body-based therapies, to just learn how to be in my body and what I was feeling and how to share that. And the camaraderie, I would say, the myth of the lone wolf, I call it, that kind of rugged cowboy, just always be tough, never show weakness. There's obviously some real pros and a positive to that kind of resiliency, right? But I think what it misses is the much deeper type of resiliency that comes from being in connection and community, particularly with other men. That, as I like to say, I don't care who you are as a man, there will be a time in your life where your body will fail you and you cannot just push forward. And that's the moment you're going to quickly see, who do I have around me? It's a very unique type of vulnerability that when we have, certain men in our life, as I would argue, we can handle that stuff. When we get knocked down, people are there to help us back up. And I think that's really the power of the group. But to kind of tie this together then.
Yeah, let me ask you a question though, before you move on, because I'm curious. I want to go back to this guy that had this presence. I talked on the podcast a little bit ago about men with presence. And one of the examples I gave with a guy that I was talking to was the guest on the podcast was, he's a big burly dude, right? Like dude of a dude, a man of a man. And he's a very soft, huggable bear sort of thing too. But he's just like, he's a big dude, right? And we were talking because I was saying to him, a lot of times this impression of man is this dude who's 6'5" and 300 pounds and jacked and just like, like The Rock or whatever, right? Just some huge, just massive dude. And the conversation we were having was, that guy could walk into a room next to a dude who's 5'2" and 100 pounds soaking wet. And the dude who's 5'2" commands more presence.
Oh, yeah.
And the dude that 5'2", you notice when he comes in, you feel it. And the dude that's 6'5" just disappears next to that guy. So it's not about body. It's not about physicality. So I'm curious with this guy that you experienced, you said some of the things already, just as far as how he interacts with his wife, et cetera. But what was it about his presence that you felt? Could you define that anymore? I'm curious.
Yeah. I mean, I would say one of the clearest indicators of this that I've experienced in myself is a man with deep presence. His nervous system will actually relax the nervous system of everyone around him. There's a sense of, being in this space feels more spacious, right? Being in this man's presence. It doesn't wind me up. It doesn't make me uncomfortable. It doesn't make me want to run away. It doesn't make me want to fight him. There's just this sense of, wow, I feel more here just by being around this person. To me, that's the real power of presence that, I do a lot of work to cultivate in myself and with other men. That you're right, it has nothing to do with our bodies. And it's one of, I help a lot of guys with dating and relationships. And it's one of the other big myths that guys fall through, that I got to have a lot of money. I got to be a certain height. I can't be balding. I have to have rock six-pack abs. And it's all honestly bullshit. If you are healthy, meaning you feel good in your body, whatever your body looks like, doesn't matter. If you can cultivate this deeper presence. And he had that. So in his presence, I relaxed. I was more here. I was more in my body. I was more in the moment. And that is a highly valuable thing. I would actually say it's the greatest currency we can cultivate as men that people will literally pay us for. They will pay us for our presence. They will pay to be around us. They will pay to have us on their teams. Because if the choice is, well, do I want to be around someone that dysregulates me or someone that co-regulates me? Most people are going to go right towards the person that co-regulates them.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't know if you have heard or are a fan of Eckhart Tolle at all, but he's he wrote, for people that aren't aware, go look him up. But he's written a lot of books and done a lot of speeches on being now, being in the presence. He calls it the now. And I got the pleasure of being able to see him in person a few years ago, and I want to see him the next time I can. And drove up, a few hours to go check him out. And he was in a pretty big stadium, not like a football stadium, but still pretty big, thousands of people there, right? And all it was is he came out onto the stage, he sat on a chair by himself with a microphone in front of him and just talked. I don't know if I've ever been more captivated for like 3 hours in my life. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't look at my watch. I didn't look around me. I have no idea what anyone else was doing. That's not true. I did look at my phone only because I was actively taking notes. It was on Do Not Disturb, but I was like taking notes on everything that he was saying because it was so good. But he just locked in thousands of people by his very presence. And he, probably more than anyone I've ever seen in my life, just brought you in so that nothing else mattered? You know, here's what I would ask the audience, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well. But think about the world we live in and how many people that you hang out with, even that could be your really close friends, partner, spouse, whoever, that when you spend time with them, they're just somewhere else. It could be because their phone's in front of them. It could be because they're thinking about something else. It could be because they're waiting to figure something out to respond to whatever you just said. You know, that still is hard for me sometimes, honestly. Leading a podcast too is like,
Sure.
I want to keep the conversation going, and I want to make sure that I'm adding value and that I'm asking you good questions as the guest. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes I find myself so stuck in that like I completely miss what you just said. And then I'm not present. And then people can feel that, right? I know I sure can. I don't have a lot of friends even, or people close to me that are that present. I mean, it's so hard for us to be present. And I would just encourage everybody listening right now, don't blame it on social media or electronics. That's a contributing factor, but it doesn't have to be. The two of us could be distracted the entire time we're talking, right? Just because we're thinking about the next thing we want to say. How do men start cultivating that in their life more, Jason?
Practice. It takes actual practice and discipline in a sense. Again, it can be accelerated, I think, by plunging into these spaces with other men who in particular will give you feedback around if they feel you drifting or they feel you not present. It's one of the great gifts we can give each other as men, is to really pull each other deeper in to our felt body experience in the moment, right here and now. And as you know, a lot of men, for all kinds of those cultural man box reasons you talked about, there's so much programming and habit that wants us to shoot up here, kind of boom, pop out into worrying about things, thinking about things, talking about literal things. I see this in groups all the time. I take men deep and then they'll want to pop out because it's uncomfortable for some men. It takes actual stamina to learn to cultivate a deeper presence of I'm going to stay connected to this moment, to my breath, to my body right now. And, there's all kinds of practices to do that. But in essence, the history of most masculine practice is doing uncomfortable things and learning to stay present in them, right? Meditation, what is it about? It's about just, can I keep coming back to this moment, kind of the most masculine practice there is in a lot of ways. So many martial arts. Can I just keep coming back to actually connecting to and feeling this moment in my body? A lot of indigenous cultures, right? Rites of passage for men. They'll cover a man in ants. What's the purpose of that? Can I stay present even when my body's freaking out, right? Can I stay present? Can I just stay here? And so there's countless ways to train it, both in ourselves and then in community, but it does, it's an actual thing you have to do, and you don't just do it once. It's not like, oh yeah, I went on my yoga retreat and I'm good now. No, this has to be a part of life that we keep coming back to over and over and over again. And so many men, including myself in my 20s, I was resistant to that, or I didn't know how to do it because I wasn't taught. And then I didn't want to be in my body because being in the present in my body was deeply uncomfortable. It was full of tension and anxiety and fear. And so many of the different pieces of emotions, which in the work I do, Josh, emotions always start as sensations in our bodies. So as we're taught to be out of our bodies as men, we're simultaneously taught to be out of our emotional experience. And then we start to get older, stuff happens to us, it's uncomfortable, it's unpleasant, emotions start to come up. Most men have never been trained what to do with that. How do I identify what I'm feeling in my body? And then what do I do with it? And because we don't know what to do with it, we turn towards, well, then I got to get away from it. So I'm going to drink it away, smoke it away, watch TV, eat it away, fuck it off, like you name it.
Yeah, sex,
like,
pornography, shopping,
we eject,
buy the new car, right? Workaholism.
Exactly. Totally. There's there's endless ways that we try to get away from our experience as men. And I'm not here to blame men for that, because most men are just not equipped. We're not taught. We're not shown that there's another way. And again, it was one of the things that really transformed me when I was in a group and I saw men completely engaging with, let's say, their anger and allowing it to move through their body. But simultaneously, I never once felt threatened or that they were unsafe. I was like, oh shit, wait, you mean anger doesn't have to mean destruction and aggression? Rewire the head? Or a man who just lets himself go into grief, like totally go into grief. And in the process of doing that, I find myself trusting and feeling even more connected to him of like, wait, actually, that wasn't weak. Like, holy shit. You know, many men I work with now will come and they're like, I wish I could cry. Like, I wish I could cry. I just can't get myself to do it. Again, just haven't been taught or been given the right environment. But as we have modeled for us that it's possible to stay grounded and present as a man and experience our full emotional selves, something else lights up where what really happens is then we don't fear the moment or an experience and we don't contract or don't resist it. So we're just much more with life. And that translates to an even deeper version of that presence. That is just, it's infectious. It's magnetic. When I'm around it, I'm just like, I want to be around you, this person, this energy. I want more of it. And then as we cultivate it as men, you know, that radiates out to our families, to our friends, to our communities, to our workplace as like a profound gift. And it takes practice. So it takes actual training of our nervous system over time to do this. And it doesn't happen in just, you know, a day. There's a lot of tools you can learn in a weekend workshop, but then just like any long-term practice, you got to keep with it over and over and over again. And, you know, I've been at this almost 2 decades now, and I'm still all the time popping out or losing presence or numbing out. Like, it's just part of the game. But overall, do I feel way more present in my life now? You bet.
I also love that you said that, because there isn't any shame in that happening. And I'll be the first to admit on a vulnerability failure podcast where I'm trying to get men to be open. If I were to sit here and say, oh yeah, I'm totally present all the time, it's fucking bullshit. I'm not. This happens to me all the time. It's something that I struggle with daily. And just like any other habit or discipline, like you said, you have to work on it daily. And if you don't work on it daily, that's fine. Don't shame yourself over that. But I'm much better than I used to be a year ago, and much better than 5 years ago, much better than 10 years ago. And that's progress. And that's all I care about. Progress, not perfection. So
that's so good.
You said something else that triggered a thought in me that I thought was so good and profound of you. And I was thinking about the men, that there's not a lot of things that I value, respect, or look up to more than a man who feels his emotions, is present with those emotions, works through those emotions, but does not allow those emotions to take control of him. Mm-hmm. That it's the dichotomy between the man who just never has an emotion, or never shows an emotion, or never experiences an emotion, never actually deals, never is present with their emotion, right? On this one side, versus the person that's just a bumbling idiot all the time because they just let emotions take over. They just let emotions rule the day. They let emotions be who they are when it's not who they are, but that's who they let, right? And it seems like you were saying at the very beginning of the episode, we only have a couple choices. Like, which one are we going to be? Right? Are we going to be this guy over here that just lets emotions take over the day? And by the way, in our society too, those can be different emotions now. It could be more like feminine emotions, like they're always sad and they're always grieving, they're always dramatic and all this sort of stuff. Or it could be more masculine emotions, like they're always an angry asshole, right?
Totally.
And I don't know. unless I am completely insecure and having a hard time with myself, I don't, neither one of those are appealing to me. Like, I don't see those guys and look at them and be like, yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want. I just want to be a total douchebag all the time, just with anger. That's so appealing. Or yeah, I just want to be a complete wreck that no one can ever count on, and that women and children would never look up to, and I lose the respect of all my fellow men. Yeah, that's who I really want to be. I mean, I don't think as men we really want either one of that, do we? But we allow it.
Not at all.
We allow it, to your point.
What we're modeled in, really how I kind of frame that is, one side is posturing. I'm fine, right? You can actually feel like I armor up my body. Like I'm posturing against the emotional content, or there's collapse where I just get totally pulled into it. Right? I collapse into my grief. I collapse into my anger, collapse into my fear. And, the sweet spot is when when our emotions can move through us, but we are not moved. Right? So there's like a sturdy frame of, this can all move through me and I'm still here. I'm right here. I'm not run by the emotions. I'm letting the emotions run through me. And the skill set we have to build around that actually involves consciously learning how to work posture and collapse. And what I mean by that is there are times it's not appropriate to vent your anger or burst out in tears because it's a high stakes situation, or, who knows what's going on, or the person you're with, quite frankly, does not have the capacity to receive that in a way that wouldn't cause more distress for everybody. So we have to kind of, consciously suppress it a little bit. And then, or there's like a wave, of something. And again, it's like, okay, this isn't the time to fully let myself go into that. But what makes us responsible men is, well, then I'm going to create and find the place where I can allow that to fully come through, where I can really allow the rage to come through my body, or where I can fully collapse into a wailing pile of snot to just let the heartache come through me for 3 to 5 minutes. Often it's like 3 to 5 minutes for this stuff. I mean, when we really go towards our emotional experience, as gnarly as it seems, we're talking 3 minutes tops for most men I work with. And then something starts to, some space opens up. But so the point being that there is a time and place to collapse. And there is a time and place where we have to posture. We just have to do it skillfully as men and know, how do I create those environments? And so when, let's say I have a charged conversation I know I need to have with a business partner or my spouse, and it's like what I might do before that conversation is turn towards my men and say, hey, do you got 5 minutes? I got to unleash some shit. And I go ape shit. I let it fly unskillfully, without filter. Probably, a little too much on the 11 out of the Richter scale. But what it does, it allows that charge to dissipate a little bit. So then I can come back from that more grounded place of, I'm pissed about what happened. And we need to have a talk about how we can make this better moving forward. Right? So I'm not actually activated in that sense, but I'm still in touch with it. So that skill set of, there's times we do have to suppress and there's times we do have to collapse, but we have to take responsibility as men for getting ourselves into these safe places, literally physical places, I would argue often with other men, where we can then bring the full brunt of whatever that emotional content is through us. And then we're not holding it throughout the rest of our lives. It's not following us around like it does for so many of us guys that, as I tend to be experiencing it myself and many men I work with, you come in as a young guy, you got like a pretty high chi battery in your 20s and 30s. Just like, yeah, I can just go, I can party, I can drink, I can work harder. Right. You start to hit your 40s and it's like, oh, wait, I got some bills I got to pay. And everything I've avoided feeling is actually taking up metabolic resource in my body. And we start to see autoimmune disorders back issues, all kinds of stuff starts to catch up with us men if we don't start to nip it in the bud and actually process it and deal with it. And so that whole process, I had framed for me that I just love is this idea of emotional fluidity. If we create a safe space to fully go into an emotion when it's there, and paradoxically, when we can fully go into it in a container, which means not forever, right? I'm not just going to collapse and be worthless for my wife or kids, but I'm going to create a container, maybe with some other men or a therapist or a coach to go in and fully be with that. When we touch it completely, it tends to dissolve much faster and transmute. And then we can come back to ourselves. And then we don't walk around, as I say, I do a lot of shadow work with guys, Josh, and it's like, you can talk about the shadow in all kinds of ways. But one metaphor I've been using, because, we're guys, we like metaphors, is kindling. It's like old forest wood. And we see this, I was living in California, pretty much anywhere in the West right now. Part of the crisis they're in is we stopped allowing fires to burn for about 100 years. So what does it mean? There is an incredible amount of material ready to ignite.
Right.
That makes these enormous fires that are just getting bigger and bigger every year. Shadow work in my life, in my kind of teaching, is the equivalent. Every time we don't feel something or process it, it starts to build up as this kind of fuel in our system. And so let's say it's anger. I was never allowed to feel angry in my life, or I don't feel safe sharing it with a partner. I'm out in the world and someone does something, a guy cuts me off in traffic or cuts in line at an ATM in what would normally be like, fuck you, right? That little ping of anger hits all that unignited fuel and content. And suddenly I explode in rage. And everybody's probably seen something like this in their lives where you can just tell someone has lost it. They are in a non-ordinary state. They're totally reactive with anger, or it could be grief, or it could be fear and panic. And what would normally be a small incident is now this huge reaction that is not at all correlated to what caused it. And so as men, we got to take responsibility for going in, clearing out the kindling and saying, wow, I have all this undealt with shit that's accumulating in my body. And if I don't handle it, it is impacting you every single day in the ways you show up. And lo and behold, what does it impact most? Your presence.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely, brother.
Because you're having to contain something around yourself. Oh, I can't say that, or I get angry, or that grief. I got to lock that down. And then we're not fully in the moment because part of us is still trying to deal with this stuff in the past. And as we learn to just take that on fearlessly and just turn towards these things in a contained way, so, that is important, in a trusted container with men, we get to liberate all of that and create so much. It's actual space I see in guys, particularly when I work with them in person, right? Something they've been holding sometimes for decades. 3 to 5 minutes later, they've embodied this energy. So they've actually let it move their body. Their face softens, their eyes soften, their breath deepens, blood comes back to the surface. They're breathing, speaking more deeply. And it's like a whole new human being is suddenly there who's not racked with tension and holding like so many of us guys are.
That's amazing. Thank you for that. Yeah, there's so many good things that you shared, and I just want to come back to a couple of them. And I think we should take this a little further too, for the listeners and viewers, especially the men that are here right now, and specifically for the women who have a man that you love. One of the saddest things to me right now is the fact that the highest rate for suicide for a while has been 35 to 50-year-old men, middle-aged men. Middle-aged men that are just at the prime of living their purpose instead of living their boyish fantasies, right? I mean, that's usually when it happens. Guys go through midlife crises and do one of two things. They either dig into their own ego and buy, Porsches and fancy clothes and fancy rings and fancy wives and younger wives and all this sort of stuff, right? Or they dig into really becoming missional and purposeful.
Yeah.
And it's sad to me that that's when a lot of guys, or at least the biggest proportion of the population, decides just to end it because it's not worth it, because whatever they've been chasing for so long is just done. And, even with all our medical advancements, I'll tell another story. I have a friend, and her ex-husband I actually knew years ago. I haven't spoken with him or had contact with him for years, but, I knew him years ago, and I just heard from her a couple weeks ago that he died from a heart attack in his sleep at 43.
Yeah.
And with the work that you do and the work that I do, and then talking to several of his friends and everything else, he wasn't seeing a doctor for any heart issues. Mm-hmm. There weren't any medical things that came up. He had some other medical stuff going on, but nothing serious. I mean, nothing more serious than any other 43-year-old man has going on, right? Like, it's just, you just start feeling stuff in your body in your 40s. You just do. At least I have, and everyone else I know does. So he didn't have anything serious going on as far as the doctor is concerned. So everyone was surprised. And the sad thing about it is, the moment I heard it, I wasn't surprised. Because years ago, at least when I knew him, and I haven't known him for years, so I can't speak to his current state, but years ago when I knew him, I remembered him as a good guy that worked hard, that loved his family, etc. But I also remembered him as somebody that always seemed like there was so much stuck in his body that he was just miserable. He wasn't miserable to other people. He just was stiff all the time. It just always seemed like he was on the verge of a nervous breakdown or a mental collapse or a panic attack or whatever. He just always felt, it just always, you talked about that guy with the presence earlier. I had the opposite presence with him. Yeah. We actually worked in the same office for a while. And every time he walked by, I was like, oh, it just, every single time I did that. If you're listening and not watching, what I'm doing is I'm straightening my body and I'm feeling tense, because that's how I always felt when I was around him. And it was really sad for me when I found out that he passed away, obviously. His ex-wife is a dear friend of mine, and I love her very much. And I feel so bad for her and her 3 kids now. I mean, I can't even imagine being just a couple years younger than that myself. But the thing that I thought was most interesting about that whole story is the fact that I wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't shock me. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Extremely sad, but makes sense,
Totally.
And
your nervous system, right, was feeling that tension.
Yeah.
That's right. Like you said, it's the opposite of presence. Certain nervous systems create more space when we're around them. But particularly as we start to do more and more work and get more present, we can feel contraction and tension in others, right? You can feel, because it actually starts to resonate in your nervous system of like, oh yeah, when I'm around him, like I feel on guard, or I feel tense. And I think this is an intuitive thing a lot more of us have access to, that again, we're just not taught. Like, what does that even mean? And you had a visceral experience of that.
Yeah. There's one other thing that I would just want to re-mention that I thought that you made a really good analogy to earlier that I really liked. And you were talking about waves of emotions. And where my head went when you were talking about these waves of emotions, it went automatically to the ocean. And if anyone's ever been in the ocean and you're standing let's say you're standing in shallow water and waves are hitting you, you know that there are some waves that just go through you. There's some waves that knock you over. But if you're standing in shallow water, as long as, there's not a tsunami or something, if you're standing in shallow water and you're just a normal human being, the waves they crash into you and they keep going. They don't knock you over because you're in shallow water. They're not that big of a deal. And I'm not a surfer, but I have experienced like some bodyboarding, and I've tried surfing before, et cetera. And one of the things that you learn when you do that, at least I learned, was when a wave takes you under, sometimes you just have to go limp and just wait for it to be over. Because sometimes the more you fight it, the more difficult it becomes. And then the more you fight it, the more likelihood things like you drowning happen, because you're actually fighting the wave so hard that the wave becomes more powerful and puts you even further down into the water.
So
and
true.
that just is such a beautiful analogy to me from my own life and my own experience about when I have fought the wave. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to feel fear right now. I'm not going to feel anger. I'm not going to feel grief. I'm not going to feel sadness. I'm a man, right? I'm going to pick myself up by my bootstraps. I'm going to figure this out. We're all going to make it happen. Still guilty to this day of doing that sometimes.
Yep.
And then again, the other approach is you just let the wave carry you wherever it carries you, and then you never do anything, and then you drown. That's also not a good approach, right? And those are the times where I go through a difficult or traumatic process, and I'm grieving, and then I'm sad, and then I just let that sadness control me. And now all of a sudden I'm a sad person. You know, it's like somebody saying that they're depressed. Well, if you say you're depressed, you're labeling yourself as depressed. So your mind believes that. That's now your identity. And while I might get depressive thoughts or feelings every once in a while, I'm not depressed, because I'm not going to allow that depression to take over me. But doesn't mean I haven't, right?
Yeah, totally.
And, you know, I love the fact that you're talking about these men's groups and being open in these men's groups. But what I also loved you talking about is just staying present in every moment. I saw this, honestly, it was difficult. I'll be honest. I saw this video about Eckhart Tolle the other day on social media, and it was difficult for me to stay present watching the video about him being present.
Sure, totally.
But what he was talking about, because of course there's a million other things, and I want to scroll to the next video and I want to move, you know. But the thing he was talking about I thought was really beautiful. He's like, he basically was saying it doesn't have to be this huge deal. Just try to stay present in your steps from the couch to the kitchen. And that's what he was talking about. He's like, when people are talking about enjoying the journey, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be this quest of a journey. It could just be the journey across the room. Am I actually enjoying this moment? What am I learning from walking from the couch to the kitchen? What am I learning from, you know, whatever it is? And you were mentioning earlier with things like martial arts and other things, you're absolutely right. We could, I'm trying my best right now in my life, so this is really good timing. It just really speaks to me. Because I'm trying in my life right now, with everything I'm doing, I'm trying to figure out how can I be more present in this moment. Doesn't matter if I'm chopping firewood, doesn't matter if I'm walking up a hill, doesn't matter if I'm cooking dinner, doesn't matter if I'm talking to you or one of my kids or anybody else. How can I be more present in this moment? Because my mind so often wants to just escape to anything. Again, it doesn't have to be technology or even social media. It can be anything. Doesn't matter.
That's the practice.
Yeah.
Right. The beauty in the end is everything is the practice.
So besides men's groups, and I want to get to that a little bit more here again in a second, what would you say are some practical tips specifically for men to get more in their body, to feel more of this embodiment that you're talking about, and to feel more present? Like when you say it's practice, that's helpful but not helpful. You know what I mean? Like what is the practice? Are there any practical tips that you can give people?
Sure. I mean, the beauty is you can turn anything into the practice, like you just named in a sense. But you know, the most fundamental one we all have access to, no matter where we are or what's going on in any given moment, is your breath. So the second you tune into your breath, the breath only ever happens in the moment, right? You can't breath in the past. You can't breath in the future. The breath is just right now. And as I like to say, breath is a portal. It's really unique in that right now, until I said breath, you probably weren't thinking about breathing. It was just happening. But it's one of the few systems inside of us, right? If I'm like, hey, Josh, pancreas harder right now. You're like, what? How do I pancreas harder? Right? Like, what do you mean? That just happens. right? We don't actually have conscious control over that in a very acute way. But breath is this really unique system that it both runs in the process unconsciously, and we can come in and take it over consciously in any given moment. And our breath then signals to all those other systems inside of us. So if we're wound up or stressed or angry, we can breathe deeper, and it starts to tell our body something. We're okay. You can slow down. You're safe. And so one of the most fundamental practices you will see, in men's work world and really any transformational world is breath. And, there's breath work practices. There's different things you can actually do. But just tuning into your breath right now. How am I breathing? Is my breath shallow? Is it deep? Is it fast? Is it slow? Is it tight? Contracted? Like, really, what's the quality? Is it going all the way down into my belly? Or, like a lot of us, am I just keeping it up in my chest? Why do we keep it up in our chest? Because if you breathe down into your belly, into your body, you're going to feel more. Oh, shit. I'm sad. Or, fuck, I'm so pissed at my buddy. Can't believe he did that, or whatever might come up. It's one of the many things that causes us to, float up here. But breath, I would say, is the practice you can do. I mean, you can start your day first thing when you wake up. 3 fully conscious, deep and relaxed breaths. That is a morning practice. Simple as that. Could be as simple as that. When you're walking, to the kitchen, how am I breathing right now? When your partner is mad at you because, you didn't put the dishes away, how am I breathing right now? How your breathing is sending out all kinds of signals. And as I teach men, it is actually one of the most foundational pieces of leadership we can bring in a moment is, what am I embodying with my breath right now? If I want to change the energy of an interaction or a moment, whether that's a high stakes conflict moment or whether that's I'm making love to my partner and I want to take us deeper, comes back to breath. Can I deepen my breath? Whoever is holding the deeper breath in the moment is holding the masculine pole.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Whoever's breathing deeper in the moment, slow, deep, full, you are holding the masculine in that part. This works with other men. It doesn't matter what your gender is or sex is or any of that. Just whoever is breathing the deepest is holding the masculine. So you can literally lead your partner, your employees with your breath. And that will simultaneously cultivate that deeper presence. So I always start with guys, just check in with your breath.
Right. Yeah. There's several things about that that I found really fascinating. And also for the, 3 minutes ago or whatever it was that you said that, I immediately thought of how I was breathing. And I realized it was a little shallow. And the moment you started talking about that, I was like, okay, why is it shallow? Like, let's get it down here more. And I started doing that. And I mean, it was just the awareness, right?
Exactly.
That automatically had me do that. But man, I think probably the most fascinating thing you just said was what you just said. And that is whoever has the deeper breath, has the masculine pull. And for a podcast and a guy that's very in tune and passionate about men becoming more of their masculine selves, I think that's really fascinating. Because a lot of the times when I get in trouble as a man, it's when I allow anger to take me over, fear to take me over, anxiety to take me over. And just to use those 3 emotions, even though we could use a lot more, every single one of those emotions has shortness of breath. Every single one.
Yep. Boom.
Exactly. You can't let anger or anxiety take you over and be in a deep breathing state. It's impossible. I've tried it. It doesn't work. So I completely agree with you. And it also actually just made me think of an interaction I had with a business partner the other day where for whatever reason, it wasn't even the topic, but for whatever reason, politics started coming up. And I found, both of us started kind of going like this a little bit. And I actually physically was aware of what was happening in my breath. I was like, why am I so, like all of a sudden?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really, really deep and meaningful. Thank you for that. Because when you get to that point, if there's awareness, it's like, okay, if I just slow down, even right there, I feel better.
Exactly. Because what you just did was you brought consciousness to the moment. And that is presence, consciousness, our awareness. So breath it's one of the most powerful embodied practices we can do. It's so simple, right? It's so simple. And we can do it any time of day. You don't have to go do, an hour meditation necessarily. You can be in your life. And as you build this body awareness to just constantly keep checking in. Yeah. How am I breathing? What's going on with my breath right now? Because that is sending all kinds of signals to my nervous system and the world around me about the state I'm in. And it in fact, like you saw, it impacts the state of other people too. So it is profound leadership to cultivate a breath awareness really in any given moment.
So let's come back to men groups, right? And I want you to, if you could further define what that actually means, like what does that even look like?
Sure.
Especially as a man with a podcast and a business that's trying to grow a tribe right now. I have things like there's a private Facebook group where people can come on and try to do that. But obviously it's different when it's on social media versus when it's in person. And this is definitely something that's coming in my future as well, is having these man groups as well. So I want to talk to you more about that offline also. But for everyone that's listening, what is, first of all, what is it? What does this look like? What are people actually doing there? And then how do men find these?
Yeah. The thing about a men's group that I'll start with is it's kind of like the word meditation. When you're like, hey, do you meditate? And you can be like, yeah. And then it's like, well, what kind? There's an endless variety in practices of meditation. And men's group is kind of a big category like that. But how the most broad way I can kind of paint a picture is it's a group of men who get together intentionally to help each other become more present in the moment and in their lives. Basically it. And there's all kinds of strategies and techniques and structures you can then use to facilitate that. Some groups are more focused on accountabilities and getting goals done. Some are more focused on emotional support and connection. Some are more focused on cultivating practice. We're going to get together and we're going to do breath work, or we're going to do qigong, or we're going to do something that really keeps us in, the moment, so to speak. And a good group's going to kind of blend all of the above. But the main thing is you're showing up with intention, with agreements, and with an orientation to what's the most important in my life. So men by ourselves, in my experience, will just naturally gravitate, like I said, up into talking about things out there. So a lot of men in our culture relate via triangulation. Me and you have our attention on a third thing. A sporting game, a hunt, fishing, a movie, women, whatever, right? And so we build connection with each other by having our attention on this third thing. What men's group really does is it turns the attention towards each other. Hey, what is it like to be you in your life right now? Where are you in pain? Where are you ejecting? Where are you crushing it? What's in the way? Where are you feeling tension? And a good group surfaces that and then actually can help slow each other down to become present to it. So, great masculine leadership inside of all of us can actually guide people in to presence. What's happening in your body as you say that? Or, what are you noticing? Or what's happening inside of you? And then, okay, that's the story. And what are you feeling? Right. And so I sometimes kind of call men's groups a good men's group too. It's like Matrix time or bullet time in the Matrix. It really slows us down so we can become aware of our inner world and get clearer about what we're feeling, what we're needing, and what we're wanting. And so a good group, you'll hear this term in men's work, right? We can help sharpen each other up, which just means get clarity for each other. I feel like I should do this thing, but I'm scared, or I'm stuck here. I don't know how to do this. And men holding presence with us, on us, guiding us deeper into our experience is going to help us solidify, oh yeah, I'm afraid. I'm afraid to talk to my wife about this. Or I'm really pissed at my dad for X. And that's the kind of thing we might know, but it's a whole different experience when we actually connect to it. And then we get to come out of the group with much more clarity about what we need to bring forward in our lives and how we're going to do that. So, it's about this intentionality of connection. It's about slowing down. It's about presence. And the best groups that I'm in and that I've been part of, there's also a continuity over time, right? So I do a lot of work where, it's a weekend retreat or something like that, and it can be profound. But the place I've really changed and I've seen men transform the most is when there's the continuity of a group that is holding them and their vision over time and can start to reflect, sometimes hard truths about, you've been coming in here for 8 months saying you hate your job and you haven't done anything about it. So do you really hate your job, or do you just want to complain? It's not always that, but there's a sense of like, hey, like this isn't shifting for you and it's causing you pain and I care about you. So how can we work on this? What needs to move here? What needs to shift? Let's figure it out. Let's figure it out together as I say, the kind of the sweetest masculine fatherly energy there is that so many of us were lacking was just, well, let's figure it out together. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, let's figure it out together. Are you scared to do that? It's okay. Let's put together a plan. Let's figure it out together. There's this sense of, you can fail. You can not know how to do it. You can be scared. And I'm going to be here with you. And we're going to keep figuring it out. And man, in my life, as I've continued to cultivate men who have me in that sense, it's like, it's better than being invulnerable. It's being able to be vulnerable. Because I can just go into things, and if they don't work out, I got a net of men behind me. That'd be my first cut on kind of the energy of what a group might be.
That's fantastic. I had this experience a little bit ago where there was this group and that I used to be part of, and there was one of the men in the group I just always appreciated and respected things that he said, and it's a group where, we would just share different things, struggles, et cetera, that we were going through. And I was part of it for quite a while with him and then left it because my schedule just didn't work. And then a few months ago, I went back to it and he was still there. And we actually had, we were sitting around eating some food, and he was talking about, it's funny that you bring up the work thing, and this is what triggered my memory. And he was talking about just all the difficulties at work and the fact that he's trying to exit out of it, and he owns this company and he just can't seem to get out. And, he dropped a day here or there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And I just looked at him and I was like, yeah, I remember you talking about that a year ago. And that's all I said. I was like, sounds like it's pretty much the same. I think that's all I said. I was like, yeah, it sounds like, I remember you talking about that a year ago. Sounds like that's about the same. And he just looked at me. And at first, it looked like defensiveness and like he was offended that I was calling him out here. I didn't say anything rude, but I called him out, right? Mm-hmm. And then he's like, oh, Josh, it's just what you do, isn't it? He's like, yeah. And then it slowly started turning, and he's like, you're right. He's like, I'm pretty much in the same spot I was in before. He's like, wow, thanks for calling me out on that. Right. And it just slowly like washed over him, and he was mature enough to just let it wash over him. Yeah. And then all of a sudden we're having a really good conversation. And then I start saying things like you were saying, like, I'm not trying to be mean here. I love you and care about you. But it seems like this is still a problem and nothing's changed. So what are you going to do? You know, and it just opened that conversation. And I've just found in my life that before anyone thinks that I'm patting myself on the back, there are far more times in my life I have not said that than when I've said it. And what I'm finding with the journey that I've been on and the older that I get, honestly, is that it never does anybody any good if I don't say anything. Never. It doesn't do me any good because I don't experience a moment of love or joy or connection or courage. It doesn't do them any good because they're still stuck in whatever negative mindsets, patterns, limiting beliefs, whatever that they're already stuck in. It doesn't help them. It doesn't help me. The only thing it does, and the reason I convince myself not to do it, is because it's scary and I think I'm going to offend somebody or I'm going to upset somebody or I'm being a jerk, which is weird because it's the opposite. I'm being a jerk if I don't say anything.
Totally.
Right? And not everybody's going to have the same response he did. And I get that too. Some people might just, he could have just gotten mad, thrown his food everywhere and left the table. That's fine if that's where he's at, right? I mean, that happens. I've been there before. I get it. But man, I couldn't connect more with what you're saying, Jason, about just that intimate connection, especially with another man. There's nothing wrong with our wives, our spouses, our women friends, whoever. They're all great. And we have different connections with them. But there's something unique and particular that I have found looking into another man's eyes, being completely present with him, and talking about what I'm going through and getting wisdom and guidance and accountability and everything from him.
Yep.
Irregardless of race, religion, sexual orientation, I don't give a shit about any of that. If it's a man and our masculine energies are connecting, there's just something that is special about that I've never found anywhere else.
Yeah, I think it's related to, like what I kind of call the unique texture and flavor of masculine love, which is this really unique thing, right? That's, I don't need anything from you, but I want you to be free. Whatever your freedom you're yearning for is, I'm a fucking champion for it. And when I see you not free, I'm going to point it out to you because I care about you. It's like the spinach in the teeth thing that I think a lot of men do not have this. Some are afraid of it, but most I have found deep down are craving
100%.
Another man who loves them so much, he won't let them get away with their shit. Just like, yeah, man, here's a place where I see you struggling to be free. And it hurts. Because it hurts to see you hurting, and I want you to be free.
To go back to this example, and again, I'm not patting myself on the back here, but what I also realized in that moment is that I've been away from this group for months and months and months and months, and no one else has said that to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how many opportunities did somebody have to say the exact same thing I said, which took a little bit of courage and it was a little uncomfortable. But how many times have I done that? How many times has there been a man in front of me talking about what they're going through and I've just taken the easy way out and I'm like, it's not my problem. It's not my issue. Hopefully he'll figure it out. We all have to figure out things ourselves one day. all that shit that's inside my head that I believe. Oh, that's powerful stuff, Jason. Thank you.
Yeah, it's the great gift.
Yeah.
We can offer each other, I think, as men, and a men's group's a particularly well-suited place for it because you get to build up that rapport and trust, right? If you just met some stranger on the street and we're giving they might not be open to it because they're like, you don't know who I am. But this guy, right? You had built rapport and trust with him. So when you came forward, he's like, oh, this is someone who I want to listen to. Right? This is a man whose feedback means something to me because he knows who I am and what I stand for. And frankly, probably what's possible for me, right? What I'm capable of. And that's, we're each other's champions as men, as I like to say. It's, it's about calling each other forward of like, man, yeah, I've been with you. I've seen your greatness. I've felt your greatness. And when it's not here, it hurts. me and it hurts the people around us. And I see it hurting you. So I'm going to let you know, hey, what you're doing right now doesn't really seem like you're in your full expression of self, your full spectrum. And yeah, there's always a little sting. I still get defensive. And then in the end, man, I'm grateful for it because my life has changed more from those pieces of feedback than anything else.
Absolutely. For sure. So, of course, if you're a man watching this and you're looking for a man's group, reach out to Jason. His information is in the show notes. Reach out to me. My information's in the show notes. We both have men's groups that we can do online, etc. But I guess my final question, what about the man that wants something in person, Jason, and they don't happen to live in either of our areas? How do they do that? Because I know a lot of men listening to this are like, yeah, that sounds amazing, but I don't want to go start one. I don't want to be the leader. I don't, I want to find, how do you even find something like this if they want to do something in person?
Yeah, the good news is it's more prevalent now than ever. When I started 20 years ago, you said men's group, most people, the only thing they think of is a church group, which is fine, but it's a different energy than what we're talking about here. But now they're kind of everywhere, particularly in bigger, more developed areas. So you can Google it, Google men's groups near me, go to meetup.com, go to Eventbrite. Mankind Project tends to have physical groups in most major cities. So it's spreading. And though I totally get the complaint, if you're a guy that can't find one in your community and you're noticing, I want this and it's not here, great opportunity for leadership to step forward and create something. And it doesn't have to be something big and complicated. It can be as simple as grabbing two buddies who you just get a sense there's a little more depth there. Hey, do you guys want to get together 2 hours every other week and just get real about what's going on in life? We'll each get 25 minutes to talk, give each other a little feedback. You can start there. It does not have to be this huge orchestrated thing. For guys that want to do that, I'm developing an offering for, here's how you can launch your own men's group in person. Here's a structure. It'll create depth.
Love that.
It's all the guidebook you kind of need. Because as much as I love leading groups, I'll kind of end here with, I'm a big proponent of decentralized groups, that something really special happens when men take full ownership of their own group. Meaning I'm not paying someone else for it. It's not part of an organization. This is ours. No one is telling us to be here, but we are here. I just moved back from California to Colorado and got to rejoin my first men's group that I was in my 20s. They've been meeting every other Wednesday for 14 years.
Wow.
Not same exact guys. And I just got to slot right back in. And their commitment does not come from the outside. Right? Their commitment to each other comes from the inside. And just what I found so potent about that in the groups I've been part of like that is there's a level of ownership then of, if we're not getting something out of this experience, it's nobody's fault. It's our fault.
Absolutely.
So we got to bring it, which means I have to bring it. Where am I not fully bringing myself forward or holding back or whatever that might be? So I'm a big fan of decentralized groups. And if you're totally new to the work, go to a retreat, go to one of Josh's groups, come to one of my groups, get a taste for what it can be like, what that masculine transmission is, which will often, kind of onboard guys to, I want more of this.
Love that. Thank you so much, Jason. So many good things to say. I know people got a lot out of it. I really appreciate. I appreciate also, just most importantly, I appreciate you bringing your presence. I appreciate you just bringing yourself today. I felt very present in the conversation, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
Yeah, such a joy, man. Love what you're up to, and so glad to be here.
Thanks, man. So again, if you're listening, if you like the episode, please like it. We'd love to hear comments. Love to hear comments. Add some comments on, if you're watching this on YouTube, add some comments down there. Add some comments on Spotify, wherever you're listening, watching, etc. Because we'd love to just have a conversation about what you think about this sort of thing. Have you experienced men's groups? Is there something that you'd like to share with the world? Unless we hear from you, we don't know how to share it. So please share it with us. If you are a man that is listening to this, that's thinking, wow, a men's group sounds really interesting, here's the first thing you could do. Call another man. Or send them this podcast episode, right? Send them this episode and say, hey, what do you think about this? Should we start one of these, right? See if they'll listen to it, spend an hour of their time. They're going to get something out of it. And then you guys go start a group. Reach out to me, reach out to Jason if you need some advice. It sounds like Jason's coming out with that guide here soon. Once we get it, we'll add it to the show notes as well. And Appreciate you all. And until next time, thanks for joining the Derelict Podcast. Talk to you soon.